Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final session of the 2021 MIT Sloan Hack for Inclusion. If we haven't met yet, I'm Josie Liu. I'm one of the co-directors of this year's hackathon. It's hard to believe that just 48 hours ago, we were hearing from President Rife, meeting our teammates for the first time, and zooming in and out of Miro when we were trying to scroll across the board. We have come a long way, but it's not over yet. This morning, you've all had the chance to peruse some of the solutions that were created. I hope you were as inspired as we were. And if you haven't had the chance, the poster session will remain live for a few weeks. We've also had lots of requests for a take-home version of the Miro board, which our facilitators are happy to provide. Keep an eye out on your emails for instructions to do that. Now, today we'll be hearing from 6 selected finalists who were chosen amongst a pool of amazing solutions. We'll watch each team's video together, and then we'll allow 5 minutes per team for Q&A from judges. After that, the judges will deliberate in a separate Zoom room, and we'll hear from our final guest speaker, Judith Batty, Interim CEO of the Girl Scouts of the USA, before coming back for the final presentation of prizes. Now, as excited as we are to get into the pitches, let me just remind you of something. In our initial registration of interest form, we asked you why you wanted to hack with us. You talked about helping companies, making new connections, learning new skills, and building towards a more equitable and inclusive world. Whether your pitch is being presented in the final session today or in the poster session via SpotMe, I think we've all made some incredible gains, and I want to congratulate each one of you for that. So as we move through these final sessions together, I would love for us to keep one question in mind. What will I do to champion DE&I in my communities? The same question is written in your participant guides, and I encourage you to spend this afternoon soaking up inspiration and taking notes. I'm going to hand it over to Elaine Harris to introduce our judges for today. Hey, Elaine, just a quick heads up that you're muted, which is totally fine. We've had our fair share of accidental muting all weekend.
Okay.
Finish as we started.
Okay. Let me thank you again, Josie, for introducing the next section of our program. So we're fortunate to have 3 outstanding professionals as our finals judges today, bringing entrepreneurial, corporate, and academic perspectives. Fahad Panjwani is a creative strategist, poet, and designer on a quest for human truths and liberation through deeply understanding our lived experiences. They are the creative director and founder of Such, a creative consulting studio that works with government agencies, nonprofits, and select for-profits to root their strategy and services in those truths. I would be remiss not to mention that Fahad is a graduate of MIT's IDM program and was the sole facilitator in the very first year of this hackathon. Jacqueline Howard has decades of corporate experience bringing superb domestic and global leadership skills. She has led teams of professionals accountable for building competitive, sustainable, high-quality, food-safe supply chains. Throughout her career, she has been a vocal advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Jacqueline is currently the Vice President of Direct Sourcing Global Supply Chain for Starbucks and resides in Seattle, Washington. Barbara Dyer is a senior lecturer at MIT Sloan and is executive director of the Good Companies, Good Jobs initiative, where she facilitates the cross-fertilization of ideas to make work for everyone in the 21st century. She also teaches USA Lab, Bridging the Divides, an Action Learning Lab, which seeks to understand issues and uncover solutions around America's economic, cultural, social, and geographic divisions. Barbara brings extensive public policy experience as well, including serving as Special Assistant to the U.S. Department of the Interior. Thank you, Fahad, Jackie, and Barbara for sacrificing your weekend time to join us today. So here's a quick review of the criteria our judges will be using. I need this. Does this idea solve a specific user need? How well does it address this need? I never would have thought of this. Is this an innovative solution to the problem? Does it have the potential to disrupt existing solutions? I can get buy-in for this. Is it likely that the solution will gain buy-in from key stakeholders? I love this. Beyond the previously mentioned criteria, something about this solution speaks to me. The judges will determine our first, second, and third prize winners. Third prize is $1,000, second prize is $3,000, and first prize is $5,000. So with no further interruptions, let's cue up the first pitch from Danaher Team 2, Spirit, presented by Serena Young.
So our challenge today was to really think about how to incentivize middle managers at Danaher to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And our solution is twofold. First, Kaizen OS, Kaizen Origin Stories, which is a storytelling initiative focused on building empathy across Danaher's global employee base. And secondly, Danaher Lead, a leadership experience for associate diversity, which is a self-identified, selective professional development program focused on underrepresented groups, but accessible to all, featuring a Danaher hackathon to drive diverse team building and innovation. So going into Kaizen OS, this storytelling initiative is really designed to cultivate empathy throughout Danaher and build understanding across difference in order to really tap into employees' intrinsic motivation to engage in D&I efforts. Employees at all levels will receive support and training to really tell their origin stories and the stories that shape them through company and department-wide fireside chats. Secondly, Danaher Lead, or Leadership Experience for Associate Diversity, is a career development program where associates can self-identify to participate and receive training and development and mentorship and sponsorship opportunities to really build a diverse pipeline of career development opportunities and talent at Danaher. And employees that go through this program will end with a stretch assignment and be identified as top talent for promotion. Lastly, part of this a key feature of the LEAD program will be an annual Danaher hackathon where any middle manager can submit a business, leadership, or innovation challenge that diverse teams composed of both LEAD participants and other Danaher employees will work to solve. And in this way, Danaher will be able to unlock innovation and drive diversity across the organization.
All of this is going to be embedded within the Danaher business system and the infinity loop that the employees are already used to. So just imagine a frustrated employee having access to a LEAD program where they can self-identify, removing a barrier to entry for growth, and also have Keynesian storytelling so that they can reflect who they are from how they got here in their own lens. As we said, all of this works to unlock the value of our middle managers. Thank you.
Serena, that was really great. Thank you so much for sharing your idea and your team's ideas. I'm curious about the process that what assumptions or hypotheses did you make about perhaps the Danaher culture or leadership or change management, and how did you go about verifying those hypotheses?
Yeah, so I think some of the assumptions we definitely made was that managers are at different levels of the spectrum or different times in their journey in terms of different levels of understanding about DEI or different levels of willingness to engage. So we needed solutions that would allow managers to engage in different ways depending on their strengths and their interests. We also anticipated a certain level of resistance or and a certain level of biases that already existed. And so we were able to interview quite a few different users at Danaher. So current middle managers, one staff member who identified as a diverse candidate to understand some of the challenges that already exist in Danaher. And so that's how we learned there is a sort of lack of career development opportunities for women and other diverse candidates at Danaher. And then what we wanted to understand, what were the incentives that already existed? Because one of our assumptions was that there weren't enough key incentives for managers to engage in D&I initiatives. So while they had the tools, we understood DEI strategy. You know, we're really trying to change culture and change behavior. And so you can't just provide tools, but you have to provide sort of the will, right? So you have that's where the storytelling and building empathy comes in.
Serena, I want to pick up on that. This is really great, and it sounds like you moved exactly in the right direction. But I'm curious, this operating system that Danaher has that they're so proud of, and so that's right out there in front. To what extent does this emphasis on continuous change, this emphasis on innovation, in a sense, determine a work organization that may go against some of these things? That is, that you're talking about a structure of incentives that is deeply embedded, and the system that you've put in place is largely voluntary. So how do the incentives begin to shift so that the organization of work can be more embracing of diversity? Because it sounds like the organization of work is embracing of this operating system that might, in some perverse way, go against what it is you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So one thing we learned was this year was the first year that Danaher has required all employees to have a performance objective related to diversity and inclusion, and a development objective. So the performance objectives are tied to merit increases or pay, but not the development objectives. So we wanted a way, for example, there are via the hackathon, via participating in the LEAD program, serving as a mentor, submitting a challenge. There are different ways for managers to engage. So that could be a part of their development goal. And the other thing is that innovation is a key part of that Danaher business system. And Danaher, they've been very successful in their industry, and their goal, one of their key reasons for focusing on D&I is to be able to have a workforce that matches their customer base, which has been changing. And so, and innovation is a key part of developing the solutions that they're bringing to market. And so research shows that diversity really drives that innovation. So I think it's a combination of being able to tie that sort of business case with also some of the internal incentives and providing managers with different ways to engage that make sense for them, as well as building some of that intrinsic motivation by providing relationship building opportunities and that building understanding across difference through storytelling.
Serena, thank you very much. This is extra relevant for a lot of organizations given last year, although it should have been relevant in decades past, because nothing has really changed in our society that would deter people from doing this automatically without being gut punched, so to speak. So just wondering how revealing Danaher has been on where their gaps are. At Starbucks, we were very public with our gaps, where leadership shows up and the diversity thereof. So I'm wondering how courageous they're going to be to reveal the gaps to their general group of stakeholders first. And secondly, to the points around metrics and sustainability, what's the check-in going to look like in the next 6 to 9 to 12 months to make sure that people have grasped the importance of it, have embedded it in every interaction, so that it has some legs to it. It's not just a moment here.
Yeah, great question, because we know accountability is a really important part of DEI strategy and initiatives. So in terms of how Danaher has revealed the gaps, from what we were able to understand, they have published goals, public goals for representation goals for 2025, including having, I believe it's 45% women in their workforce, which currently is more around 38%. So they do have some degree of public goals, which does allow different stakeholders to keep them accountable. And so this career pipeline solution will also help meet that goal, so that there are opportunities, so that even when we're bringing in more women, more diverse candidates, there's a pathway and we're retaining those. And in terms of sort of metrics for our, I think your second question was around, how do we check in on our solution? I think we tried to provide solutions that could be implemented now, for example, the storytelling initiative, and also grow over time. So I think there are a lot of metrics that can be tied into the overall metrics, such as, percent of associates that go through this LEAD program or participate in this hackathon that stay at Danaher longer, that are promoted, the number of managers that are engaged in sort of as a sponsor for these LEAD participants, and various ways. So I think there are a lot of metrics that can be built in depending on how the programs evolve over time that also tie into Danaher's larger strategic objectives around DEI.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you so much, Serena and Team Danaher. That was great. We're going to welcome the next video now from Ford Team 4. They are the Ford Innovation Hub and will be presented by Anne Lewis.
Good morning, everyone. This is Jorge. He's 32 years old and married. He lives in Mexico Town with his young daughter and commutes over an hour to work each day. He cannot afford a car. His daughter Maria goes to Mayberry Elementary School, where her classmates frequently miss class and the building is in terrible condition. Jorge has to leave work early because his daughter does not have anywhere to go after school. He is worried. He doesn't know what opportunities Maria will have in the future. Times have been tough in Detroit, with job access decreasing by over 25% from 2000 to 2012. Jorge's friends who lived nearby have slowly moved to the suburbs, searching for better schools, leaving empty homes behind. We propose a two-part solution to address Jorge's short and long-term problems. The first component of our proposal is a free shuttle service connecting Corktown and Mexico Town to the downtown hub of the Detroit bus network and the city as a whole. This will provide a valuable experimental platform for Ford's Mobility Innovation Hub while serving an important community benefit and helping the local residents get to and from their places of work. This service can evolve with the innovations brought forth by Ford, including electric vehicles and autonomous transportation. The second component of our proposal addresses Jorge's long-term aspirations for his daughter. We want Ford to invest in local schools to keep students engaged. This will take the form of purchasing needed school resources, new after-school programming, and most importantly, Ford employees volunteering to teach students like Maria about careers in STEM and show them the amazing work happening at the new Innovation Hub. Long-term investment and engagement between the Ford community and the Detroit school system will encourage more families to stay in Detroit and raise their kids in the area while attracting new companies to move to Detroit and take advantage of an educated workforce. Last weekend, Maria took the Ford shuttle to the education weekend at the new Ford Innovation Hub. For the first time, she learned what it was like to be an engineer after playing games with the friendly Ford employees at the MCS building. Jorge can now see a future for his daughter. Maybe someday she can take the shuttle to work as a Ford engineer herself. Ford's shuttle service between Corktown and the rest of Detroit gave Jorge the opportunity to save 30 minutes on each leg of his commute. After a few months, Jorge was able to find a better job in Highland Park, which was not within reach for him before the shuttle service. People from all over Detroit are able to more easily commute to Corktown, helping local businesses thrive. Thanks for creating a better future for me and my family.
I'll start. Hi there. First of all, really nice job with the presentation. Actually hit me close to home. From the Midwest, and also had a chance to be an engineer for a day in high school. So that's my interest in being an engineer, and there I was in school doing that. So just a quick question on metrics again. So love the idea of cutting 30 minutes off of any commute. As we go back to work full time, it's going to be interesting to see how that feels driving in and out of work. But on the school side, the metric around, again, impact on the students and sustained measurements of benefits, what kind of metrics are in place to see how sustainable that program can be and the benefits thereof?
Well, there are several statistics, and this is one of the things that school systems do is generate metrics. But one of the things that we have found in local schools in Detroit is that in some places they have up to a 41% repeated absentee rate of students, which is very high, as most of you must know. There's also the National Educational Assessment. I don't have the name quite right. And in Detroit, we rank at the bottom of the list nationally. And I'll just give you a couple of statistics on that. These are for, I'm giving an sort of a combination of grades 4 and 8. In math, the number of students that are at the proficient or above stage is 5 to 6% in those two grades. In science, it's 3 to 4%. And in reading, it's 6 to 7%, which is a little bit better, but not much. It will be easy to track these over time because these tests, these are based on national tests, and they're given regularly. So we should be able to see how things are going and tweak them as needed. I'd like to, in that same vein, if you don't mind, I'd like to quote part of something from the superintendent of the Detroit Public Schools community program. She says that the NEAP scores are not a reflection of our students' talent or of their potential. Instead, they're indicative of a series of things in the school system that haven't implemented best practices in at least 10 years. And that includes curriculum, instruction, academic intervention, and school improvement. They're starting by working on the system's infrastructure. I grew up in Detroit, and I come back to Detroit occasionally to visit family. And I know that, you know, in many of the schools, they have to put buckets out when it rains, which tells you something about the infrastructure. And if it's leaking that badly, the buildings must be moldy. They're planning to focus on Common Core standards, which is the national standard, implementing data systems to monitor student performance, provide intervention, and curriculum that is aligned with the standards. The superintendent says that they need time and space to build capacity and improvement. I suspect that they also need money and elbow grease from Ford Motor Company.
So I have a question just to piggyback on this, and maybe it's for clarification. I mean,
okay.
The problem that you've identified in the video, one is a transportation problem, and two is an inspiration, quality of education problem. The solution, one is the shuttle, and one question related to that is how sustainable is that over time? Is that more ultimately a public sector role than a corporate role? But the second is the innovation hub is a place where Maria in this story went on a Saturday. Is the results and the problem that you've just described quite graphically and powerfully to be solved by students coming on Saturday to an innovation hub? Or is there something much greater that would shift the whole structure of Detroit's public education system? I don't see the solution of an innovation hub, which is place-based, requires the students to come to it, perhaps provides opportunities for Ford employees to volunteer, addressing the problem of the magnitude that you just created. So what problem is it really designed to solve?
Well, I believe that we see this really as a problem that, from Ford's perspective, of Ford interacting really closely with the community. Both of those are solutions to that problem. If Ford can interact with the community, they can better assess what the community needs in order to do better community development and in order to do better education or facilitate better education, in order to do expand out in Detroit so that there's an increase in communication and interaction between Ford and the community. And when we're talking about
understand, I don't want to, but
okay.
to understand, do they have to come to the hub in order for them?
No, I was getting to that. We think that it's very important that Ford not be insulated into its innovation hub, that it must reach out. And as we talked with people who were being interviewed, there was some outreach, but it seemed from the Ford employees that we talked with that most of what was happening was Ford expecting people to come into the hub. What we'd like to see is with using these shuttles, and it may not be sustainable for Ford to do this over the long run, but eventually they should be able to interact with the Detroit bus system and other transportation methods and develop transportation methods for Detroit to implement on its own to help facilitate movement between the innovation hub, Corktown and Mexican Town, and the rest of the city. If in the schools, because you asked about that in particular, if in the schools, Ford creates a coalition of Ford company employees and people from the community, including the city government and maybe even state government officials, to look carefully at the problem, they can identify a variety of places, I suspect, where Ford can help facilitate improvement. And that would mean Ford employees going into the school systems, for example, to mentor students on site, to help with after-school programs. And this could all be volunteer, things I've mentioned so far could all be volunteer basis, but also to have students come in to the Innovation Center with their families so they can be exposed to the varieties of kinds of jobs that exist. When I grew up in Detroit, and this was admittedly quite a while ago, I knew about people that cleaned other people's houses. I knew about people that taught, and I knew about doctors. And that was really my exposure, except for watching Jacques Cousteau in the movies and on television. And it was that got me really excited about making the career choice that I made, which was being a scientist.
Great. And out of fairness to all the teams, we're going to end that there, but I know 5 minutes goes by so quickly. But thank you so much, Anne. No need to apologize, but thank you so much, Anne, and all of the Ford team. We're so excited to welcome our next team now, Generation W Team 3. They're the Wow Factory, and we'll be watching their video next.
Welcome to the Wow Factory by Generation W, led by girls who run the world. WOW is a movement to expose girls to the positive and the possible through connections with other girls and women leaders. In COVID-19, it is clear that teen girls need a safe online space where they can develop their passions and learn to lead. Generation WOW wants to grow so that even more girls can experience the power of WOWsdom. So the challenge is posed. How might we leverage safe, accessible tech so that we can engage teen girls in passion development and grow Generation WOW participant numbers? 15-year-old Alyssa said it best. My counselor helped me do a survey for my likes and dislikes, but then what? Well, welcome to the Wow Factory, a community-based platform for girls to connect, explore their passions, known as Wow Factors, and lead other girls as experts in their own right as Gen WOW ambassadors across the U.S. When signing up, users are authenticated through their high school email and school site. Any girl across the nation can join as long as her school has approved the resource of the Wow Factory, ensuring safety and data privacy. All of the information from sign-up appears on your private and secure profile. The welcome page is your Generation WOW hub, easy access to Wow Factor channels, upcoming events, and a spotlight to learn about other Wow Factors out there. Any interest from college prep to mental health is right at your fingertips. Here we see the Coding Wow Factor channel, led by Ambassador Alyssa. These role models curate content, highlight passions, and are trained and compensated for their leadership effort. All members have a voice and can post and connect in a safe, moderated environment for girls, by girls, and led by GenWow ambassadors. Thanks for visiting the Wow Factory, led by girls who run the world.
Hi, Jasmine.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. I like the wow factor. Just really exciting things about that age of girls trying to figure out what they want to invest time in, not so much what they want to be in their grow, because we never figure that out, right? What would you say would be the long-term aspect of this mentoring connection? Would you assume that the girls would stay connected to those mentors over their high school years and beyond, or is there a set time period?
That's a great question. So just to clarify mentors, do you mean the GenWow ambassadors, so the teen-to-teen mentoring component, or the adult component of mentorship?
The adult, sorry.
Great question. So with the site, because it's authenticated through the school partner, we actually scrub that on a quarterly or biannual basis. So any girl who is matriculated out of that school or who is no longer attending that school no longer has access through that school site. However, when it comes to the mentorship component, we really wanted to make sure it was led by girls, because sometimes mentors are pushed on girls instead of them inviting them in. And so what that looks like on the site when you're currently a member is that your WOW ambassador is in charge of your channel, and they have a pool of resources, including those that are Gen WOW mentors. They can then invite a mentor to come onto the channel. So I might say, Jacqueline, I'd love for you to come for office hours from 3 to 5. If you accepted, we would then make that available to our channel. It's important to remember for that mentorship connection that on the main page, we have a mentor sign-up application process, which means that all mentors are background checks and go through a mentor training process. Because just because you're a girl doesn't mean you know how to best work with girls when it comes to their development.
Hi, Jasmine. Jasmine, I'm curious about what did you and your team learn about designing technology for teen girls? Like what is specific about this group that you learned that perhaps the rest of us can now be aware of?
One really surprising factor for us that came up both in our user insights and our research was the need for a space for teen-led curated content. We did a competitive analysis after we ideated to say, let's gut check and make sure we know that this idea actually works. And the overwhelming theme from 7 different online sites that we visited that were specifically curated for teen girls is that they were adult-led with teen input instead of teen-led with adult support. This was validated in our user research as well with girls, when one of our girls, who I'll call Nakia, said her favorite club she's involved in at school is actually leading other undergraduates or freshmen and sophomores through mentorship. So I think that was the most exciting thing we learned, was that teens love to lead and they want a space to lead. They just need adult support in that to make sure we moderate safety and encourage that it's a safe space for them to do so.
Jasmine, this is awesome. Absolutely awesome. I really appreciate the answers. I have a question about what's tough, and that is, what do you see are the potential obstacles? Do you see school authentication being difficult to achieve just because of the press on schools? Do you see populations of girls for whom this might be a challenge, that is technology limitations or whatever else? What are the obstacles that you see?
Yeah, so I'm first going to address the ones you mentioned and explain why we don't see those as large obstacles, and then I'll transition to what might be some challenges. So in terms of school, all of the WOWSDom curriculum is actually SEL nationally curriculum based. So it's actually a lift for schools to make this resource available because they're supposed to be doing SEL Common Core curriculum anyway. So it's an additional resource for them. And then you also asked in terms of access for the girls. We thought about creating an app. But we went in one of our interviews, she actually said she was 12 and just used a computer. 90% of girls and 90% of teens have access to the internet. But when we look at low-income communities, they actually get access to cell phones at a later stage. So those who have an income under $30,000 tend to have access to a cell phone at a later age. About 18% get a cell phone at age 16. So we didn't have an issue when it came to access in terms of income or buy-in from schools. But some obstacles that we could see existing would be the growth strategy. Currently, Gen Wow grows through word of mouth and school administrators. And so when you think about what that looks like, it's really about, does Generation W have the capacity to market this to schools? Because if schools are able to engage, then we really think the buy-in will be there. Because that's the main channel, that's why we wanted to keep that key stakeholder there and make sure that we continue the relationship with schools, but make sure that that barrier of marketing capacity would be mitigated by ensuring the staff did so.
Great. Well, that's perfect timing. Thank you so much, Jasmine. It's great to hear from you. And we're excited to now welcome our next video, which is coming from Microsoft Team 3, Level Ed, presented by Maria.
Hello, everyone. Today we bring you Level Ed. So who said that we all learn the same way? When we were young, we had the same learning materials that everyone else in the class, regardless of our background and abilities. Imagine that instead of having a book standardized to all students, the book changes to adapt to every person learning needs. The pandemic is a unique opportunity to take the next step in the educational revolution, personalized and leveled education. Students with different learning abilities face unparalleled challenges in the digital environment, which is affecting their learning processes, motivation, and engagement. So today we bring you Level Ed. Level Ed is a digital platform that leverages AI in order to provide the personalized learning journey through adaptive learning. By adapting to the needs and preferences of every single student, we level the education gap and create an engaging and an inclusive learning experience. Level Ed leverages AI in different ways. We're gonna talk through 5 points. Number 1, it develops personalized exercises and optimizes the teaching methods for each student that adapts to the curriculum to each student needs and learning preferences. Second, it improves students' engagement with a gamification approach. Third, simplifies the teaching process and reporting for students, teachers, and families. Fourth, allows teachers to track in real-time students' performance, identifying improvement opportunities in a proactive way. And fifth, it enhances interaction in the virtual environment between teachers and students. So we are identifying the needs of the educational system, and we spoke about this with different students, teachers. And what we learned is that we want to bring a platform to where it provides offline learning materials library for limited internet access. It offers a range of teacher materials for gamification of learning. It allows for notifications for breaks of screen time. It minimizes it's a user-friendly environment for elementary students, and it uses proactive education empowered by AI. So please let us give every single student around the world equal opportunities to learning, working, and dreaming by leveling the educational field. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Maria. Really good starting opening commentary about learning ability and aptitude and challenges to accommodate each individual. I love the use of AI. You know, how real time is that as people do grow and develop their learning aptitude? Is this something that could be regenerated every school year, or how would you see this migrating into a learn tool long term?
Well, our initial approach was to have a completely personalized learning experience for each student. So we interpreted this as having a unique student profile, which would be kept all along the educational years. Our target group is elementary students, and we saw this as something that they could have during the entirety of their studies, and it could be updated real time for their progress. The real time approach is something that is really actual for the teacher, which is something that was really highlighted to us in interviews. And this is also an aspect that could help the parent to have, for example, a very easy progress report, monthly report for the student, which is something that could be very easily accommodated through the activity of the student in the platform, because everything is tracked from where they are engaging more, what types of media they like. For example, do they prefer videos? Do they learn better with games or puzzles? And this entire thing could be really, could help to the growth of the student. With leveraging artificial intelligence, our main goal is to use this to have a more proactive way of learning instead of reactive, and suggest materials that could help them more. So if you're good at logic or math, why not try chess? So something that you have trained the machine to do for you, and really broaden your horizons, especially when you don't have all the motivations from your environment, which in low income cases is the case very often.
Thank you.
This is great, Maria. Thank you so much. How do you see this addressing the challenge of, in a sense, stigmatizing students or tracking them? Does this open up a lot more possibilities and overcome that problem, or by having so much information traveling with the student from year to year, does it have a potential for backfiring and creating more stigmatization?
This is a very interesting point that we actually discussed a lot in our team. And in terms of the data themselves, it was very important for us to have a strict privacy in the first step to who sees this and who is this information available to. So for us, this was clear that the teacher has my class, and under my class, only the teacher has access to this data. And the parent, again, has also only access to the students' data that they are responsible for. So there is no access to students, other students in the class. So this is in terms of privacy. In terms of division, this is actually something that we didn't see from a division point of view, because the first discussions for using a personalized learning approach were from a methodology that has been already tested from an NGO in India that they work with the MIT JPAL Research Center. And what they do is they basically test how it is to personalize the methodology based on not the age or the grade, but based on the educational level. And the educational level is a lot more than strict grades or performance, is where you engage, where you need more help, where you have weaknesses. And this is really not stigmatization. And from our point of view, this is something that really stands by you and supports you during the entire process.
Maria, who are you not designing for? What type of students, what type of elementary school students are not being catered here?
Well, from our original design, we started with a target for elementary students, so young students that, for example, we had this benefit in our team. We were all from very different backgrounds, but what we found in common is that we needed to be independent, maybe a lot more independent during our starting years. And if you don't have the materials to learn effectively, this can really affect your entire career path and journey. So we really tried to have these features for low-income and minority elementary students at first, because, for example, the offline materials that we would offer, it's a library of features for people with no internet access. So our target is mainly there. However, as a design, I don't think it is meant to exclude anyone. And our goal here was not to solve the problem of virtual learning, but to see this from a point of view that we have this opportunity with COVID to completely change how we see education. And it's really important. Now we have the tools of digitalization, and it's really unjust to try to fit in everyone in the same method of learning when you can have so much ability through personalization and inclusion in learning.
Great, thank you so much, Maria. Next, we're going to hear from MIT Sloan CDO Team 2, Team MAD. Excited to see.
This challenge, sponsored by the Sloan Career Development Office, asks how the CDO can help students identify employers who are genuinely moving the needle on DEI. Through user and industry research, we have identified quantitative and qualitative data on employers that would benefit Sloan students. Quantitative data on employers will take the form of web scraping and aggregating publicly available DEI information. Second, we believe that alumni are the best ambassadors for an employer. They can relay their workplace experiences to empower current students with the qualitative information they need. Equipped with both, students can make informed career decisions. First, we propose to design an algorithm to scrape the web with predefined keywords related to the company name, leadership, and DEI lexicon, as vocabulary is a good indicator of authenticity. Students already use Career Central, and by adding company DEI indicators in each job listing, students can receive immediate insight. The DEI Talks count objectively presents how publicly visible a company is in supporting or discussing DEI. DEI Walks provides a count of third-party benchmarking and news related to DEI efforts and cultural climate in the company. The links will take them to a new DEI tab under the company details section. Here, they can find a feed of news and reports about DEI in the company. Our goal is to make publicly available information accessible to all students. The second portion of this proposal is the Slack bot Donut. To facilitate equal access to the Sloan Alumni Network, we recommend the CDO compile a list of alumni who are able to connect with students one-on-one and share with student clubs. The leads of those groups can then add alumni to existing club Slack channels to enable Donut to work its pairing magic. Our example here is the FinTech Student Club at Sloan. Admins of the channel can add the Donut bot and set parameters for intros. Donut will announce the program to everyone in the channel, and each user will log in once to identify as a student or alumnus. Donut can easily be integrated with LinkedIn for alumni who don't use Slack. This is a real hack. It fits into natural interactions of Sloan students with the CDO, each other, and alumni. The implementation is straightforward, low cost, and fast. It can easily be replicated and shared with other schools, so the ripple effects are massive. Hi.
Hello. My quick question to you. First of all, I love the idea of making it easy and integrated with current platforms because I don't use Slack. One more app I'm going to blow up. But on that, the visual or the public exchange of diversity topics with a company. So if a company overindulges in posting things and saying we're doing this and we're doing that, how do you see through that as reality check on what's actually happening to move the diversity inclusion along within the organization, embed it, and make it something that's sustainable? That's always the question.
Awesome. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it because it's something that we discussed pretty deeply over the last 2 days. So specifically want to drill into the two metrics that we're exposing to users or students rather on the Career Central website, right? So the first of these is DEI Talks, which is just a count driven by the number of times a company speaks out positively on DEI. And to actually gauge positivity and authenticity, we've compiled a list called the DEI lexicon that actually filters for words that we think are more and more authentic. So our sort of first stab at this of the lexicon list is in the appendix of our slide deck, which I hope you guys have access to, so feel free to take a look. But then what we're proposing is that the CDO involves students to continue to maintain the list and add additional words that they think that employers should be using. So phrases like anti-racist, the difference between rioters and protesters, we think that is very important. So the talk point for an employer will only go up if they're actually tweeting or writing press releases with intentional language. The second is the DEI Walks metric. So Walks is specifically populated by third-party reporting on DEI work and cultural climate of a company. So this can take the form of reports such as the Human Rights Campaign's Equality Index. It can also be driven by any news on sort of minority groups that are advancing to leadership positions within a company. So that is much more third party, whereas Talks is related to what the company is actually saying and taking a stance on.
I think that, hi, Debo, nice to meet you. Again, to piggyback, these are all good starting points, but ultimately you're trying to figure out how to convey authenticity in DEI. And the authenticity measures are often difficult to come by, but it has to do with their approach to hiring, the ways in which they organize work systems, the ways in which culture is manifested throughout the company. And those are sometimes attainable through the walk signals that you're providing, but often it's looking even more deeply into the work system. You can imagine a firm that is absolutely stellar, but doesn't put a lot of attention into into sort of the reputational side of it, and doesn't get much attention on these external measures because they actually are doing a great job. So there aren't a lot of complainers, and there aren't. So how do you get? What's the next level of depth on determining authenticity here?
Absolutely. So the cultural climate and kind of what the workplace experience looks like day to day, that's what we're leaning in on the donut solution. So we think that alumni and just generally current employees of an organization are the best ambassadors for providing transparency on the workplace culture. In kind of the user research phase that we had, we actually interviewed 3 students who are all second-year MBA students at Sloan. And they all said that this was something that they really wanted. They want insider knowledge, and that sometimes they had difficulty connecting with alumni, specifically those who are about 10 to 15 years out of school, because that is a greater measure of, I tried working at company XY and there wasn't long-term career growth for me, so I moved to this company and this is a much better fit. And so those are the kind of natural connections that we are trying to foster through the donut aspect of the proposal. Sorry, just one more thing I wanted to add is also just that, so our solution promotes kind of empowering students with the information that they want, and they can then decide what parts of DEI initiatives are most important to them. So we understand that inclusion and belonging at work is something very subjective. So the same initiative might not mean as much to certain people. So just wanted to add that in as well.
Great work, David. Thank you so much. Now we're really excited to watch the video of our 6th and final finalist team. This is Toast Team 3, Designing Against the Grain, presented by David.
My name is Jose, and I'm with Team Designing Against the Grain. We were helping Toast figure out how to better partner to restaurant owners owned by Black, Indigenous, and people of color, which we will refer to as BIPOC moving forward. For us, it's clear that Toast has and is incentivized to create the best possible experience for these restaurants because they will profit, Toast as a business, if the businesses that they're serving are profiting and doing well. So we believe that Toast is actually uniquely positioned to solve this very, very challenging problem. And what we know today is that 95% of Black-owned businesses and BIPOC businesses are not receiving the types of loans that they need. We know that these populations are rejected from loans at twice the rate that their white counterparts are. And most importantly, that's leading to a lot of failure in these businesses because they don't have access to communities and capital that can support them. Now, the pandemic is actually not a unique situation that is just introducing these problems, but rather it's exacerbating the challenges that already exist in the system, and more importantly, highlighting how fragile the system today is. And we believe that you cannot address a systemic problem with a point solution, but you need a system that's going to replace and enhance what's already existing. And that's why we believe Toast is uniquely positioned to solve this via Toast Collective, which is a partnership with BIPOC restaurateurs that enables Toast to provide them with capital, community, and coaching, the big 3 C's that we heard from our interviews. Now, capital is something that can be deployed via Toast Capital, which already exists, but it can be uniquely positioned for communities BIPOC, which do not typically have the credit scores, but that Toast can help underwrite because they know how successful the businesses are. We know that these restaurateurs are sacrificing a lot today, and so it's unique value proposition for Toast to be able to provide this. Now, the access to coaching is really around mentorship and being able to provide them with the resources that they need to be successful in business. We know that today, a lot of these folks don't come from those families or have those networks to be able to sustain them. And most importantly, community, which is the ability for me as a customer to be able to fund some of these businesses via things like rounding up at point of sale and being able to fund the businesses moving forward. And so with this, we wanted to thank you for your time. If you have an opportunity to visit any of the restaurants, we highly encourage you to do so. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.
Just made me hungry. Go ahead, Pod.
Hi, David. I'm curious about what did you learn about designing for this BIPOC community? How do you design better technology where relations can develop for BIPOC folks? And what is unknown about it for y'all?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, obviously, I am not a member of the BIPOC community. A lot of members of my team are, and everybody that we talked to were. So it was really interesting to see how there's such an emphasis in that community on social capital, and trying to find a way to design around and bring that social capital into the design. You know, because where they're lacking access to financial capital through some of maybe the traditional digital means and in-person means, you know, capitalizing on that social network that a lot of members of the BIPOC community have, and it's so important to them. You know, that's really where we were trying to focus our efforts, you know, through the community building, through the mentoring, and in those ways.
How impactful have you guys projected up to be? I mean, it's actually something a lot of organizations do, but what is the projection on what that would bring those different organizations, different things?
Sure. So, you know, one of the Toast as a company breaks down their member organizations into three very distinct categories: enterprise, midsize, and what they call SMBs, small to medium businesses. That SMB category is their largest percentage of members. It is that category of restaurant that is also predominantly family owned, predominantly owned by members of the BIPOC community. So growing that network within Toast, you know, from a bottom line business perspective, makes sense to them, and it's really sort of in their interest to continue down with that program. So, and developing the relationships between their enterprise customers and their SMBs in that mentoring relationship is really where we see potential for long-term growth. And as a way to measure that, looking at the failure rate or rather the rate of success of restaurants that join this program against the national average, where you've got restaurants failing at 60 to 80% within the first year, and much higher than that in the BIPOC community.
So what is the scale that we're talking about? You know, when we look at the overall rate of failure, it's very high, but we're talking about large numbers, and if it's a relatively small number that can have a lot of coaching and support, you can understand why they might be more successful. How can that success sustain as it scales up?
Sure. You know, one of the key things, you know, and this would really be a key next step in the process, is doing a small in-market experiment. You have to pilot this program somewhere. You know, we were going to recommend Boston because it's where Toast is located. It's where they have the relationships. Restaurants in this SMB category that are largely BIPOC owned, that's where the community really makes a difference. They are hyper localized restaurants. And so to your question about how this would scale up, you know, you look at what kind of success you get in that small market, whether it's citywide, even neighborhood wide, and then you model that across. And because of that hyper locality, you can replicate this in different neighborhoods across the country. LA is going to have its own network of mentoring. Atlanta is going to have its own network. New York City is going to have its own network. So you're replicating a model and then dropping it in and fine tuning it to the specifics of the locality.
All right, thank you so much, David. And let me thank all of the finalist teams who presented so much. I'm sure there is a stream of virtual claps coming through as well. Thank you as well to all of our judges. We loved getting into the Q&A with you, and it's so great to get to go a little deeper into some of these solutions. Now, the judges are actually going to head off to deliberate in a separate Zoom room. And while they're doing that, I am delighted to introduce our final speaker event of the hackathon, a fireside chat with Judith Batty, Interim CEO of the Girl Scouts of the USA. Judith grew up Girl Scouting, Brownie through senior, which she says gave her confidence while teaching her about different perspectives and the value of teamwork. Judith was a pace setter and role model during her 28 years as an executive and senior attorney at ExxonMobil Corporation, where, among her many achievements, she was the first female and first African-American general counsel of its publicly traded Japanese affiliate. Judith will be joined by Malia Lazu, lecturer in the Technological Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Strategic Management Group at the MIT Sloan School of Management. She's also the former EVP, Chief Experience and Culture Officer at Berkshire Bank, and founder of the Urban Labs, which seeks to help businesses better understand the nuances of diversity. Let's welcome them to the virtual stage.
Hello, and hello everyone joining us. Judith, it's great to see you again. I was lucky enough to catch up with Judith, everyone, while we were talking about how we're going to take you on a fabulous 45-minute journey, and your energy is just effervescent. It's wonderful to be connected with you again.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here, and hello everyone. I am very happy to be here today.
So let's get started with, obviously you're the interim head of the Girl Scouts, which just seems like such a great job. I was a brownie. I didn't get much further than that, but yes, I was a brownie. And as a woman of color, it's really nice to know that you're at the helm and, thinking about how brownies and Girl Scouts can remain in girls' lives for forever. And you come that way from ExxonMobil. Before we jump into that, if we could maybe just get a little story of how you go from being the corporate maven to being the mentor, girls leading maven.
So I joined the board of Girl Scouts of the USA about 6 years ago, actually almost 6.5 years ago now. I was still working at ExxonMobil at the time, and I joined the national board. I served on the board. Our terms are 3 years. So I was coming to the end of my third year term. While on the board, I had led a couple of task forces, been involved in some committees. I was the International Commissioner for Girl Scouts. So I was very involved as a board member. The previous CEO decided she wanted to go a different direction. And we needed an interim CEO while we looked for a new permanent CEO. I was then retired from ExxonMobil. I retired from ExxonMobil about 5 years ago. And so I had the time. It was COVID. I had the passion. They asked me. I did not ask them. They asked me. And my source of gratification during my retirement has been travel. And of course, with COVID, I couldn't travel. And I was leaning in anyway. So I said, sure, I would love to lead the Girl Scouts. It was actually surprising though, when we were doing the announcement that I was going to be interim, someone asked if I was the first Black CEO. And all of us looked around and said, can't be, no, it's 2021. I can't be the first. And we did our research, and we were all kind of surprised that I am the first African-American CEO of Girl Scouts of the USA.
Wow. Well, yay. And yes, it's 2021, but it's great to see that the Girl Scouts are, now have broken that ceiling and can create opportunity.
I will say the two CEOs before me were Latinx. They were Latinas. But I am the first African-American.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's stay on that theme. We're here at hack inclusion and thinking about how do we create companies that have more inclusion and or that promote inclusivity. And you were at a huge company, to say the least. And maybe one of the only women of color, Black women in particular. Could you tell us just a little bit about what it's like when inclusion isn't there, right? Like what is it like to be one of the only in a company so large?
Right. So it's really kind of interesting because and actually you hit the nail on the head. Inclusion is the issue. To me, diversity is the numbers, right? Bring people in. Inclusion is they feel like they belong there and they stay and they grow and they get promoted and they move on. The one thing about ExxonMobil is their C-suite, for the most part, actually, I'm trying to think if it's all white males. And I'm trying to think if there was a time when it was not all white males. And frankly, I can't think of a time when the C-suite was not all white males.
Well, it probably gets less the more you go back, right? Like if it didn't happen before the 60s, it wasn't probably.
Right. But, every now and then a woman might sneak in but at ExxonMobil, that's not happened. They've not had a white woman and they've not had Mobil did have a person of color in their C-suite, but ExxonMobil has not. And I think what happens in a big company is they do a great job at recruiting. I mean, Exxon and Mobil both, and then the combined company, I was from the Mobil side of the merger, both recruited at HBCUs. They have all these, programs, mentoring programs. We had a Black affinity, employee affinity group. They had the programs, but the programs didn't match, in my opinion, didn't match the evaluation system, the appraisal system, which is how you get promoted, right? Which is how you move up. Some departments within the company did better than others. And so in some departments, you did have Black managers. You got to that sort of ceiling, so to speak. And others, they didn't. So for me, I think it was kind of interesting for me personally, only because I actually grew up, my first school, kindergarten, I actually integrated the school. So I grew up being.
Wait, where was this? Wait, hold on. You can't just say you integrated a school and then we go on. We're going to have to take a minute on that. Where was this?
This was in Buffalo, New York. So I started school in a private school. And I started school at a private school in Buffalo, and I integrated that school. My mother had a friend who had 2 sons. The 3 of us started school together, and the 3 of us were the only Black kids in the whole school.
And was it a peaceful integration?
Oh yeah, it was fine. School went from pre-K all the way through 12. Yeah, it was fine. And in fact, I didn't notice. It was just the way it was. But because of that, and because I always went to private schools, I was used to always being either the only one or one of very few. And so when I got to, ExxonMobil, it was just my life. So I did what I always do. So the fact that I was the only one in the room what was surprising and what was great was those occasions when I was not the only one in the room. And actually, those are the occasions I remember. So I had
Would you guys see each other like across the boardroom and be so excited? Yeah. Like, let's meet at the coffee.
Well, can I tell you a funny story about that?
Yes.
So we were doing a deal in Namibia. We were negotiating with the government for drilling rights. And of course, my team was all white males, and I was the lawyer on the team. And it was right after Namibia gained independence, and they gained independence peacefully. So most of the bureaucrats were still white, but the ministers were Black. So we're in this negotiating session. It's my first negotiating session. Another lawyer, my boss actually, had been on the deal before me. I was taking it over. So in the room, there were about 20 people in the room, lawyers, geologists, all kinds of folk. But there were only 2 Black folk, me and the minister. So it was my first meeting, and I was trying to get up to speed. So I was doing a lot of listening, not a lot of talking. But towards the end of the meeting, I actually had a question. So I went to open my mouth to ask my question, and the minister says, "Wait, stop, wait, everybody quiet. My sister has a question. Sister, what is your question?" And it was like, oh my
Thank you,
God.
brother.
Really? I was like, oh my gosh. So it took a minute for me to sort of, oh yeah, I did have a question.
Right, you're right, and you're like,
yeah.
oh right, I'm in a liberated country right now,
Exactly.
where there's a
Exactly.
platform for my voice. It wants to be heard.
Exactly. So yeah, so for me, it was always interesting. I will say, I still hit that ceiling, just like, I'm still a Black woman, so I still hit that ceiling. I got further than many, but I didn't get all the way as far as I wanted to go. There was another Black woman who actually was higher than me. So in my particular department, we did have a one more senior Black person who, so she got very far actually, but she's now retired as well.
It still seems just to be the one, right? And
oh, absolutely, you can't have a group. You can't have a group. You can't have more than one.
That's a gang. You said something that I wanna unpack a little bit, because I think it gets at the heart of why this has been a problem for years, right? George Floyd was in no way the first time that America became shocked at the racism, right? And yet when the rubber hits the road, we fail, right? People will set goals. And then when we need to make cuts, when we need to, right, when the business side hits, diversity is always seen as a cost center, right? Rather than not. And I would just love if you could talk a little bit about like that culture and how maybe it can be cracked, or how we can crack that code. I often hear terms like seniority, and I think like if seniority is important in your company will not be able to ever get equitable numbers, right? Like the white guys just have too much seniority to ever get in front of us, but are there certain cultural norms that you think if we could dismantle, we would be in a much better place?
Yeah, there are a few. One is, Exxon and Mobil basically are full of engineers, and Exxon was run by engineers. And, if you don't measure it, it's not important. And the times when both Exxon and Mobil made strides in hiring BIPOC people as well as promoting BIPOC people are the times when that was part of somebody's appraisal, right? They were measured against it. Their livelihood was dependent.
Right, tied to bonus, tied to bonus.
Right, tied to bonus, tied to their rating. And when it's not measured, it goes by the wayside. So one is just measuring it. Two is companies need to look at their appraisal systems. Appraisal systems, especially the one at ExxonMobil, if you have conscious or unconscious bias, they are going to show up in that appraisal system, because especially the way ExxonMobil, it's a ranking system, and you're ranked by your supervisor. Well, if your supervisor has biases, your rank is necessarily going to be lower. If your rank is lower, you don't get the same promotions, you don't get the same opportunities. So people, so looking at the appraisal system, trying to figure out how you get those biases out of the appraisal system, or at least other people weighing in to compensate for biases of a supervisor or whatever. So your career is not dependent on one person's assessment of you, right? So those are the two biggest things I see. The third thing is making sure that younger BIPOC employees have the same opportunities as white employees. I mean, one of the things in a global company, is, at least mine, is if you don't move around, you don't go up. And you need to know that going in. You need to be prepared for that going in. So if you want to move up in the ranks, you need to know, and you, not necessarily overseas, but you will move. I moved within the US and outside of the US. So you have to be prepared to move. You can't stay static. You can't stay in the same neighborhood. You can't raise your kids in one school district in the same, that's not going to happen in a big company if you want to move up. So some of those things, they need to be explained. The other thing about a big company is you can get lost in a big company, white, black, or otherwise. And it's really important not only to have mentors in the company, but to have sponsors within the company. And a lot of BIPOC people have mentors, but they don't have sponsors. And you need a sponsor. And for those of you who don't know the difference.
I was just going to say, what's a sponsor if I'm not at AA or I'm not trying to get into a club?
Exactly. Within a company, a mentor is someone who you can talk to who will help you and give you advice. A sponsor is someone who has that power in the appraisal room, who can help guide your career, who can advocate for you, who is in the room when they're deciding who's getting the next promotion or who's getting that next job. And you need both. You need a sponsor and you need a mentor. And if you're a BIPOC person, you also need that whole posse outside of the company that you can call and say, okay, am I crazy? Or, who can keep you grounded?
Absolutely. Right. Well, I think it's so important to remember, especially if you're a BIPOC person in a majority white space, that there is an emotional tax there that comes whether you have a good day or a bad day, right? It's that there's this underlying feeling, whether it's, daily microaggressions, and again, not bad. Right. They're not from malice, but they still don't feel good.
But they still don't feel good, and they still happen. So going back to experiences, one of the experiences I remember is that always shocked me, and I remember to this day, is, whenever you get a new boss or whenever you go into a new situation, at least for me, you're always questioned, right? You're the black girl in the room. Do you really know what you're talking about? You get 190 questions. They're trying to figure out if you really know your stuff. And it gets annoying after a while, but you know what's going to happen. And so you prepare and you just keep going. Right after the merger between Exxon and Mobil, I had to sit in a meeting for my boss with the president of one of the divisions, who was his client. And, I was sitting in for him. I was listening. I wasn't sure what was going on, but, I was listening. And towards the end of the meeting, the president of the company asked me a question. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I answered the question. I told him what I thought. And he said, okay. And he said, well, what would you advise us to do? I told him. He said, okay, so we're going to do that. And then he didn't question me. He didn't bat an eye. And I was like, what just happened?
You're like, I just got treated like a white man.
Exactly. It's like, what just happened? Oh my God. I always was grateful to him for that. And I actually went to him afterwards and I said, I really appreciate that. But yeah, he never,
Did he know?
He said, well,
was he
what
actively trying to be, was he actively making sure other voices, was he an ally, or was he just someone who was a great guy?
No, it was it was both.
And the two can be combined, right? The two can be combined. But I guess I'm asking, was it conscious?
Right. And I asked him, and what he said to me was, my assumption was, if you're in that chair, you know what you're doing because you're in that chair and somebody put you in that chair. So I didn't have to question it. I assumed because you were in that chair, you knew what you were doing. You know, we have a company full of lawyers, and the lawyers put you in that chair. So,
right. So who am I?
So who am I? By the same token, that person eventually, he wasn't then, but he did eventually become the the executive sponsor of the Black Affinity employee affinity group. So he did have that within him, but but in that particular situation, it was just, it was a legal question, and he wanted my legal advice. He wasn't, he wasn't
well,
kind
and
of
he
making
probably
me talk.
had done enough of his own work to not need to question you. Right.
Yeah.
You know, that he, you know, it was probably, so, you know, we have a quick question. Well, first I want to just shout out a comment that someone has put in the chat around that she was a Girl Scout for 10 years and her mother was a leader. And then being a GS leader for my daughter, greatly empowering experiences for me as a Black woman. The confidence I gained carried me to and through MIT and is still pushing me forward today. And it's just so true. I mean, to have a space of women and girls where you can be, you know, safe and express yourself and, you know, sell cookies and do you know, you're learning how to be a leader.
You're learning how to be a leader. You're learning about money. You're learning confidence. You're learning all kinds of things. You're learning cybersecurity. We have cybersecurity badges. We have all kinds of STEM badges. So,
well, I didn't have the cybersecurity badge.
I didn't either.
We didn't have that back then. But I did make a beautiful paper mache.
Oh, there you go. I will say though, even at, it's not really even at, one of my goals at Girl Scouts is to get us on the path of becoming an anti-racist organization. So that is one of my goals. I was a Girl Scout growing up. My mother was my leader as well. I had a great experience in Girl Scouts. I did all kinds of things. I did things that I think made me want to be a lawyer, because growing up all along, I wanted to be a doctor, and I did some things in Girl Scouts, and this advocating thing isn't bad. So I became a lawyer. But, you know, not all girls have the same experience. Not all BIPOC girls have the same experience. And so I'm trying to get us, we are moving in that space. We're going to do an audit of our programming, our hiring, our boards. You know, we're a federated system. So we're starting that journey as well, because it's really important that all girls have the opportunity to be a Girl Scout, to learn what it is to be girl-led, to learn how to use your voice, to learn how to advocate, as well as just the substantive, you know, financial literacy, entrepreneurial skills, the STEM skills, it's the civics, you know, it's all there.
The interpersonal, right?
And the interpersonal skills, learning how to talk to people, learning how to sell, learning how to
look someone in the eye.
All of that.
Mm-hmm,
yes.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. You know, I'm working on a piece right now, and I found a stat and we have a question actually around measurement, but I'm going to use it as a moment to throw out a stat, which I think places like Girl Scouts could really do a lot to change. And that stat is that 3/4 of American white people do not have a non-white friend. And and you know, and it makes sense. We're such a segregated country, but that's, you know, I mean, that's over 100 million, you know, like that's a real number, right? That's a material number.
When you sent me that question, I was like, how does that happen? That's shocking to me. That was shocking.
You think you're like, well, I have white friends. Right. You know, and I think it's a great stat for, you know, for everyone here, you know, here today. But, you know, Girl Scouts, I feel like, can really play a role in that proximity, that proximity.
Absolutely can, and should and will.
Yes. Okay.
But I don't even know how to approach that, because I can't even imagine where those people live.
Well, you know what I think? So first, I think it shows the segregation, right?
Right.
From the in America, right? And that's true. But the other thing I think it shows is that even when we're in proximity, we're not in social intimacy, right? So you may see white people or Black people in your neighborhood, but it doesn't mean, like King said, right? The most segregated day in America is Sunday, right?
It's Sunday.
When everyone, and so I think the social, really, this idea of friend, but we started this conversation and you mentioned the term belonging, which I think is so important because you can be somewhere, like you said, I can be somewhere, but it doesn't mean, I can be at MIT, but it doesn't mean if I decide to take a nap, 911 might not, we're seeing all of this stuff where it's like, I obviously still don't belong here. And I think, not having those friends, definitely doesn't help us, in seeing ourselves. But we have a question from the audience, asking about measurements and when you're thinking about corporate goals in the context of makeup of our society. So should you just straight up take census? If there's 15% Black people, you should have 15% in your company. Is that how you should look at goals, or is there a different way that would make more sense? And so I'm going to let you answer that, and then I'm also going to jump in with my little 2 cents.
Okay. So so I'm going to answer it from the way we approach it in Girl Scouts. So Girl Scouts is a not-for-profit that serves girls in a community. And the way I look at it's a federated system. So we have 111 councils around the country. And the way I look at the numbers is if a council is in an area that is X% Black, X% Indigenous people, X% Latinx, then their membership should reflect that. And if it doesn't, now it doesn't have to be to the number to the letter, but it should be close. And if it doesn't, then there's some issue, I think, and we need to address it. When it comes to corporate America, the number should be close. I mean, if it's an American company and most of the, and the US staff is 40,000 people, yes, the percentages should be there, and they should be percentages throughout all levels of the corporation. A lot of times corporations say they have those percentages, and indeed they do, but the Black folks are concentrated at the bottom of the pay scale and everybody else is at the top of the pay scale, and that doesn't work either. So yes, it should have those percentages, but it should have those percentages in every pay scale.
Yes, yes, and I think that's so important. And when you look at corporations, you're going to see, a majority of their people of color are sitting at the bottom, right? And it just gets more male, more white, more straight, more cisgendered, right? More all of those things, exactly. I would also say that you don't only want to think about diversity in numbers. So I think it's important to, because what you don't want to start is like, oh my God, we're at 14% Black. We need another percent. Give me Blacks, right? Like that's not how you emerge an ecosystem of equity and belonging. And so I think, corporate goals should be set. It's great to use census. It's also great to use local census. As you said, if your headquarters is based in a majority minority city, then maybe you should have more than the national average, right? If you're based somewhere. So, look at those numbers, but also stop looking at diversity as numeric, right? Like these are human beings. And so you want to figure out how do you get involved in a community so that Black people want to apply and that you're able to hire them and move them up.
And they want to stay. And they want to stay. I mean, if you, we're like I said, at Girl Scouts, we're starting the work of being an anti-racist organization. But the whole point of that is if you are anti-racist and you have racial justice, the numbers kind of take care of themselves because you're not hiring people, promoting people, doing things because of color, because of, you're not, there's no hierarchy in skin color, there's no hierarchy in physical attributes. And so the numbers should take care of themselves because you should just be drawing from all people in the community.
Exactly. When I was at the bank, I had no problem hiring it from a diverse pool, right? Because those were my networks. Like I knew the folks to call to get those applications in. And the relationship part of this is so important. There's a couple other questions, but I'm actually going to pull this one out because I think this is so important and something that so much we feel, which is, what would be your most important piece of advice for someone given a position but suffering from tokenism in the corporate world? And it's hard to be that only person, and it's hard to know that you're not affirmative. I don't know. I recommend everyone read Mediocre. That's recently out. But yeah, just what piece of advice would you give for folks who feel like a token?
Right. Well, and you will feel it. You will feel it. So, okay, I can already tell you what I did. I was working because I wanted a house. I wanted to travel. I wanted to, pay for certain things for my sister's kids. I wanted to do X. I was a token, granted, but I was getting paid. I did my job. I did it well. I had my bad days. I called my girlfriends, and they're frankly tokens in other companies, so they got it. I think what I internalized is I knew what I was doing. I was good at what I was doing. It was their problem if they didn't have more of me. It wasn't my problem that I was the only one. And so I did my job, and I did it well, and I went about my business. And I made it my business to nicely correct people when they said things that were off color or off, or made assumptions about people or things. And that happened a lot. But you can't let it stop you. I mean, you have a job to do and you have a life to live, and that's their problem. That's not your problem. Your problem is just doing your job and getting it done.
And the politely correcting, right? I mean, I think just because other people don't see you as equal doesn't mean you don't see
yourself as equal. I have
yourself as making sure that you're like, don't start believing that you're a token, right? Because actually you're probably one of the most valuable people at the company because you're actually coming from a different experience. I was talking to someone from Nike the other day, and they were saying how when you get different people in the room, like you just get ideas. You get ideas,
right?
Right, you get ideas, right? It's like, oh, if we only have we have a lot of Ivy League white guys' opinions, right? Like, let's get a state school kid's opinion, right? Like it's just, it'll give you different ideas to get different folks in the room, and know that that's what you're bringing.
That's what you're bringing. And I can't tell you in my 28 years how many times I was mistaken for a secretary. Even when I'm sitting in my office with a name on the door, even when I'm sitting at a table full of lawyers and there's a desk on the side with a secretary sitting at it. We were closing a big deal. We were in this big conference room. There's a table full of lawyers. There's a secretary on the side. This white man comes in the room, comes straight to me, Black woman sitting at the table, and says, "Can you give me 3 copies?" My room, the guys in my room, they all know me, they went silent.
Right, they're like,
oh no, what's she gonna do now?
That's when you just pick up your tea. You're like, sips tea.
Yeah, so I just said, the secretary's over there. And he looked at me, he turned beet red, apologized, because about 10 minutes before that, him and his colleagues had piled in the room, introduced themselves to my team, except for me. So he then realized his mistake. He turned beet red, walked out, and then all of them piled back in to introduce themselves to me. So you know,
and enjoy those moments.
Exactly.
Like as the only person, you know, that's the stuff that brings you, and not responding, like just sitting there and letting it sit in the air and letting everyone look at the moment and everyone experience the moment. You know, they're important learnings, and I think if you can maintain the confidence, which you know, also, you know, I mean, I started therapy when I, you know, I had never been on the 38th floor before, right? And like, so I got to this place, and I had never been in a majority white space, right? I had never been in a C-suite, right? Before. And so I was in this majority white space, and I thought it was important that I actually have a place for me to be able to work out. Like you said, my girlfriends were a huge help, right? Like, and all of that. But the other thing that I want to pull from that story is that, you know, someone here said, can you talk about being an anti-racist, especially in the South, and with the Girl Scouts, And so I'm going to give you a couple minutes to talk about that. But I just want to point out that those moments are why not being racist is not enough, and why you have to be an anti-racist, because you will get caught up in assumptions if you actually are not trained to see the world differently. But before we get, because I have one closing question. So before we get to that, the second to the last question, can you speak about how the Girl Scouts is working to become more anti-racist, especially in the South?
So it's really kind of interesting that you bring that up, and you bring up the South. We've had Black troops since we were founded in it's since like 3 years after our founding. So in the South they were segregated, in the North they weren't, but we've had Black troops all along. So for us to become anti-racist, each council is kind of, we're taking it where they are. And there are actually some councils in the South that have done some really great work. And there were some councils in the North that haven't. Exactly. So I wouldn't put geography on this, is kind of where I'm coming from. It's pervasive. And it's not geographic, South, North, East, West. It's just everywhere. So every council is at a different stage, and we're looking at each council as well as GSUSA to try to figure out how we can basically systematize becoming anti-racist, actively anti-racist. And we're starting with basically an assessment and audit, and hopefully that'll kick off soon. I've had a little trouble finding a consulting firm that's large enough to handle the whole movement. But cross my fingers, I think I'm close. Cross your fingers, everyone. So that's how we're doing it. But I would not put geography on it. It's you know, it's kind of pervasive.
Well, right. I mean, it's an American problem. And, you know, I often remind people the one place King couldn't pull off a nonviolent march was Chicago. Actually, he was able to do everything in the South, but it was Chicago that he had to stop. So,
can I say one quick thing? Our brand of racism is different, but it's not an American problem.
That's right.
You know, I've worked all over the world. There is an anti-Black sentiment in a whole lot of places other than the U.S. It's just different in the U.S. because of our history.
Right. Well, and I mean, and our history is that European, right? Like,
right.
This is a version of it, but
British
colonial France,
colonialism, right? France, Portugal, Spain, exactly.
And Japan. I mean, I know we're coming to close, but I just quickly want to pull out, you know, it was interesting to see the anti-Black sentiment in Asia when I was out there. And did you feel that a little bit in Japan? It was just interesting, like the assumptions about who I was because I was a Black woman.
I was ready for the anti-Black sentiment in Japan, but to be perfectly honest, the anti-female manager sentiment.
See, and that being from Hawaii, that I was ready for.
Oh my gosh. That took precedent over everything, especially since I was the manager. I was general counsel. I had, Japanese male lawyers reporting to me, and they were fine actually. But when I got out into the world, into meetings and whatever, it was, people didn't know what to do. And the other thing about it, which was really kind of interesting, was my Japanese while I was there actually got pretty good. So they would have these sidebars, and I could understand what they were talking about. And so sometimes I would just sort of interject, and they'd just get, really wide-eyed then, because they're like, oh my God, she understands this too.
Right, so, exactly. You'd be like, And we want to shout out, this is no shade to the Globe that we're all saying
all, because I was
anti-Black problems.
I had a great time in Japan, and I made some great friends.
Oh yeah.
And, they're very pragmatic. And, once they understood that I was there and I was the boss, and, I was going to be there, and it was great. Had a great,
and tribes
great
tribe up, right? Like,
exactly.
I often joke around and say, if this was BC, we'd be like, Caesar sucks, right? Like there's always there's always a power dynamic.
There's always something. Exactly.
Well, listen, as we're coming to close, I saw this last question and just thought it was a great ending question. And it might be a great campaign for the Girl Scouts too. What is the one piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
The one piece of advice. Oh, okay. So the one thing that I think I did early on in my career, which I learned a little late, is I'm very good about doing my work and advocating for others. I wasn't as good as advocating for myself. I made assumptions that my work would speak for itself. Your work does not speak for itself. You also need to advocate for yourself. And it's very important for you to do. It's very important for you to keep doing. And you think you might only have to do it once with one person. That is not true. You need to advocate for yourself your whole career, every day. And I think that is the one piece of advice that I would give my younger self.
Oh,
to learn how to advocate for yourself.
That's great. Right. And don't see it as anything but. It's not,
Exactly.
You're not losing humility. You're not, you're not sitting in ego. You're advocating.
Yep.
Oh, well, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank
Judith.
you.
This has been great.
I enjoyed this. Thank you. I appreciate it. I loved being here. I hope I gave some useful advice to the students out there.
Yes, I think you did. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Judith and Malia. What an inspiring way to close out our hackathon. We covered a lot of important topics, and Judith, we really appreciate how candid you were in sharing so many powerful examples of what it's really like to be the only one. This just highlights the importance of working towards inclusion, which is, exactly why we're all here today. So thank you so much again for joining us. And now everyone, thank you. And now everyone, we are so excited to move into the final portion of our program. Congratulations, everyone. We did it. We've made it through the Hack for Inclusion, and we have so much to be proud of. Not only have we welcomed 300 hackers, over 100 observers, we have built 45 unique solutions to real and urgent problems. We've conducted over 150 user interviews. Between us, we've accumulated well over 3,200 hours of human-centered design, and who knows how many thousands of Miro Post-it notes we've created together. Not only this, we've built connections, we've learned new skills, we've challenged biases, and we've pushed boundaries. And I hope we've armed our sponsor organizations and all of you to reimagine work, broaden access, and strengthen communities. We couldn't have done it without you. We have a lot of people to thank for making this event happen. Thank you to all of our sponsors whose financial support makes the event possible, and without whom we wouldn't have these challenges. Thank you to our panelists, speakers, moderators, and judges who have taken valuable time out of their weekends to share so much wisdom with us, including in this most recent session. Thank you to our challenged mentors and design facilitators who have been on the ground all weekend, supporting teams with content and process expertise. I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say you've been truly such amazing coaches and role models for us. Of course, we also have to thank our incredible Sloan for Inclusion planning team, as well as our lead facilitators and Hacking Discrimination alumni supporters. I'm sure you've all noticed that this hackathon is not like other hackathons. The planning team has put hundreds of hours into planning this event, making it as engaging, inclusive, impactful, and educational as possible. In person, I imagine there would be thunderous applause, so please feel free to drop them a kudos or a virtual clap in the live chat and discussion boards. Finally, and importantly, thank you all. Every year we hear from our hackers what an impactful experience this hackathon is. Thank you for your energy, your creativity, your patience, optimism, and willingness to learn and grow. I'm glad that you have brought so many of the elements that we love about an in-person hackathon to this virtual setting, and I'm so honored to be joined by such a wide audience. We hope that this is just the beginning. Now, I want to add 3 personal calls to action today. First, keep hacking. We've done a lot, but we certainly haven't done it all. Inequality, injustice, and oppression are real, and they continue to manifest in our workplaces and communities today, sometimes in ways that we are all too familiar with, and unfortunately sometimes in ways that are new and unexpected. Be change makers and bring the spirit of hacking that we started this weekend with wherever you go. Second, keep learning. This weekend, we learned that each of us is on our own DE&I journey. Keep uncovering and challenging your biases. Keep seeking out different and marginalized voices, and always be willing to hear another perspective and adjust your thinking as you learn. My third action for you, keep in touch. Join our LinkedIn alumni group and share resources, ideas, progress on solutions from this weekend. If you are interested in continuing to work on a solution with one of the sponsors, there will be space to indicate that on the feedback form we send tonight. And if you might be interested in sponsoring or partnering with the Hack for Inclusion, please reach out via email. For everyone here, you have made some really special connections this weekend, so keep building on them. Find each other on LinkedIn, Instagram, Substack, wherever you gather. And now we celebrate. I'm going to hand it over to Elaine.
Thank you. So we're going to start with the Crowd's Choice Award for the most votes from the hackers. And the winner of $1,000 is Microsoft for Team for Kids. So congratulations to this team for doing an outstanding job and impressing your fellow hackers. Our third place winner is Team Microsoft 3 Level Ed. And I'd like to share a few comments from the judges. COVID, never before seen such shock, and school systems struggled. And here comes this AI tool with resources, easy to access, relationship building with instructors. This is going to be challenging, especially in the public school system, which is bureaucratic and focused on testing. But this idea, especially in light of COVID, is very powerful. So congratulations to Level Ed. Our second place winner is Toast 3, Designing Against the Grain. This team had a solid problem statement and they focused on a solid population. Small and medium-sized businesses as restaurants owned by BIPOC folks. folks that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. And the solution is wholesome, thinking about leveraging social capital in these communities, being hyper-local and hyper-curious about what different communities need, and then working with the power of TOAST to shift capital and shift resources. So congratulations again to TOAST 3. And our first place winner is Wow Factor, Generation W, Team 3. This has potential for growth. They love the focus on leveraging the strength of teen girls, focusing on girls who want to lead. Let them lead, and adults can support them as they want to be supported. In terms of the design process, they were clear on who they were designing for and then designing a viable solution for the population. So congratulations to all our winners. We'll be in touch to get your prize money to you. Everyone have a safe and healthy rest of your Sunday. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next year. Bye.